like standard trainings that we share with everyone.
Yeah.
This is like specific to sensors and a deep dive.
Those are great. No pressure. There's only 250 people that are going to be watching.
You're gonna kill
There's only
it.
41 on
No pressure.
right now.
Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're located in the country. And welcome to this Qolsys training on in-depth training on security sensors. And we're excited to have everybody attending today, and we're going to be going through a lot of stuff. I do want to wait just about 1 minute, as we do see some more attendees jumping on right now. So we're just going to give them a second to jump on, and then we'll get things started. Just to introduce myself, this is Mark Bateman. I'm part of the technical account management team, and we look forward to presenting this today. A little deep dive on sensors, and hopefully we can answer a lot of questions for you guys, and explain how some of these things work. So we're excited for this. We do have Whitney on also with our team. She's part of our marketing team, and she does a lot of things that are behind the scenes, even with our, development of web pages and resources and all that kind of stuff. So Whitney does an amazing job, and she's on this call today to answer any questions. So if you guys do have questions, normally we'd love to just have it being open, anybody can talk type thing. But once you start getting over, 20 people attending a webinar, you get up into those 50 numbers or 100 people on a webinar, we have found it's just much easier to have everybody muted. And then, if people have questions, you can just jump on the go to webinar control panel, type in your questions, and Whitney and I will be answering those for you. But in today's little sensor deep dive training, we're going to be going over a ton of stuff. I know this is a security sensor training, but we're going to start off just a little overview on today's technology. We'll get into our S-line sensors, how the encryption works there, and we'll talk about PowerG sensors as well after we get through the S-line, and kind of how those work as far as the encryption and the enrollment, because it is unique compared to how other sensors enroll. We'll also talk about our safety sensors, and that option to add things in as a 24-hour zone, and how that kind of creates a mini partition with the panel. And then we'll jump into, depending on how we're looking with time, we do want to keep this under an hour. So depending how we're looking with time, we will jump into some of our Z-Wave products, and then we'll go through our SRF sensor test, and then some other testing and tools with the panel. So we hope this is, very this is some knowledge for you guys to have. This is a good resource for you, this training. And like I said, if you have any questions, please jump on and ask away. And Whitney and myself will be getting those answered for you. To start off, the panel, if you open up a panel, this is just a little intro to our panels. They have daughter cards. And the first of those daughter cards, there's 4 of them, is our PowerG card. And this is with the IQ Panel 2 Plus. It's on the market now. And the IQ Panel 2 would not have this PowerG card. But yeah, the newer panels, the IQ Panel 2 Plus has a PowerG card in it. A lot of people ask, well, what's PowerG? I've never heard of this type of sensor or whatnot. Well, dude, it's an amazing sensor, and we'll kind of get into even some more in depth. This is just an overview, but it has about 4 times the range of a traditional SRF sensor. So in our panel, you're going to get 4 times the range. So if you're, doing an install and you're having a hard time getting, maybe it's that one door or window on the far side of the house, if you had an IQ Panel 2 Plus, you could just get a PowerG sensor, the door window sensor, and, you're going to have such incredible range, you're not going to have to worry about that. You can just put that in. Also, it's a 2-way sensor. Most sensors that we use, a standard SRF sensor, they just communicate to the panel. A PowerG sensor can actually communicate to the panel, but then also receive information from the panel. And we'll get into that. It also has this military-grade 128-bit AES encryption. It's a mega encrypted technology, and it's a 50-channel frequency hopping sensor. So it's jumping through channels and sending signals, making it just super encrypted. It's just an incredible technology, and we are glad to have it on our panel because it's just so awesome. Let me see this. I want to make sure. All right. Next thing that I want to just show on the panel here. Just 1 second. Let me get rid of this. Is we have the security RF. So, security RF sensors. This is showing you, hey, our panel will hold 128 sensors. So that's between all the frequencies, even including PowerG. But a lot of sensors, 128. And our standard panel comes with the 319 megahertz technology and that daughter card in it. The PowerG or the IQ Panel 2 Plus, you can actually get it in different flavors. You can get it in the 319 in this card here, or you can get it in a 345, which would take over, let's say, a Honeywell or 2 gig system. And then you can also, it's starting to ship in 433. And 433 we'll start seeing more towards the end of the year, more fully hitting distribution. So that would be the security RF sensors. And then also we have a Z-Wave Plus card here. And then we have an image sensor. And so, we are going to start this training off on our talking more about the S-line sensors, and then we'll get into the PowerG sensors and how those work. So once again, here's the IQ Panel 2 Plus with PowerG, which is incredible. I mean, there's a lot of dealers out there now that are just saying, hey, I don't want to deal with sensor issues or sensors going offline. And they've made the decision that, hey, we're just going pure PowerG. This also allows us to do more, get into some of the commercial space with PowerG. So really awesome technology. And this is the IQ Panel 2 Plus. Once again, the gold box is going to be, support Legacy 319 also and have the PowerG daughter card. The silver box is the one that will support 2 gig and Honeywell. Like I said, that is now available in distribution. And then the 433, it's slowly started to hit the market, but excuse me, but our main shipments aren't going to be arriving till the end of this year. So November, December is when they'll be hitting distribution. And that red box takes over Legacy 433. People ask, so what's the benefit of this? Why would I want to use, or what's the benefit of, having these other frequencies, the 345 panel or 433? Well, we all know it's obvious as far as for a takeover. You can take over, let's say with the 345, they have existing Honeywell or 2 gig sensors, you can take over those sensors. People might say, hey, what if what if they have, life safety? Well, since that radio is native to the panel, you can also take over life safety, which is incredible. With a translator, you cannot take over life safety, but with these cards being native to the panel allows you to take over life safety. So pretty awesome stuff. Let's see this. And so you do know we do have a list that we'll kind of go through here in a second. That's going to show all the different sensors that work with the different panels. So we did have a question about that. So the PowerG sensors we will be going over. But first off with S-line. What is S-line? What does it mean? S-line stands for secure line. So, S-line sensors utilize an advanced encryption scheme between the sensor and the panel. And this helps prevent, any replay attacks or eliminates replay attacks, things like that. People say, well, what's a replay attack? We have devices here where in our office where you can actually, if somebody sends a signal from a keypad or a door opening and closing, you can record that. You can make a device that records transmissions for very cheap with parts on Amazon. And, if somebody wanted to rob someone's home, they could record a door opening, let's say, and then, hey, middle of the night, they could replay that door opening and it's going to set the alarm off. And they would think they're having a false alarm. And that's either going to make them bypass that sensor or not arm their system, and now their system is vulnerable. So with that encryption, it's going to prevent and eliminate replay attacks. And the way it works is at the time of pairing, the S-line technology passes a unique key which enables this encryption to happen. And it's also 319 is also backwards compatible with legacy 319 sensors. But as far as the encryption, only works with the Qolsys encrypted 319 sensors. If somebody has, if you're taking over a 319 GE sensor, Interlogix, it's not going to be encrypted. It's not an encrypted sensor. But so we'll take those over. And as far as the full line of devices with our S-line, like I said, we're going over S-line first, and then we'll go over PowerG. So we have the main panel, a 7-inch panel. We have our IQ remote, that can come on back plate, or you can mount it on the wall. Very clean secondary panel. And then we have our sensors. On here you see our Mini S, our standard mini sensor. Then we have our standard door sensors, kind of newer to the market. It's been out there for probably 9 months now, but and we look at it as our standard sensor. It gets about 30% more range than the mini, and it actually uses the same battery and the same guts that are in the recess sensor. So that's what allows you to get that, has a different technology in it. Let's see this. So, and we'll just slowly go through each of these sensors, and I'm going to kind of go over some best practices with them, with each sensor. So, security devices, first of all. We talked about the IQ remote. Now, some of the specs on it is you can pair up to 3 total remotes. These work over Wi-Fi via the home router. So you would just, connect your remote to that home router, and then you'll pair it to the panel, and it works through that Wi-Fi signaling. It does have to be, on the 2.4 gigahertz network. Also, let's say if for some reason the customer doesn't have Wi-Fi in their home, then you can go through the panel access point. So the panel access point doesn't have the same power normally as a home router, but that is a way to have a secondary panel connected. It can be wall mounted, and it also comes with a table stand. A lot of people with a secondary, they'll just put them on their nightstand, and it's very clean. It mimics the main panel as far as chimes, the voices, the different pages. It does not, right now, it does not do disarm photos, but it is a really, really cool panel. It does do disarm. That is actually something we did add. It does do disarm photos, but it doesn't send them up to alarm.com. They're just stored locally on the IQ remote. So some best practices with the IQ remote. First of all, you want to make sure it's connected to the same 2.4 gigahertz network as the main panel, and it's in good signal range. So what does that mean? If the main panel is connected to the 5 gigahertz network, it's not going to work. You need to have that main panel on the 2.4 and the remote. The remote will only work on the 2.4 gigahertz network. One thing that's good about that is the 2.4 network is normally going to get farther range. It's going to send out a stronger, or a signal that goes out farther, where the 5 doesn't go out as far, but it's a quicker signal. So it's always the 2.4 gigahertz network, once again, that needs to be connected to. And then you want to make sure it's in good signal range. If you do not have good signal range, then you're going to have issues with your remote dropping offline. That makes sense. So also, one thing to do is be sure it updates to the same software as the panel. So before you connect a remote, what you want to do is update the panel, the main panel, make sure it's up to the latest software. And then when you sync the remote to it, the remote's automatically going to realize, hey, I'm on a different software, and it's going to automatically update to the latest software and match the software that's on the panel. One thing you need to be careful on with these, I've seen this in my own home personally, is be careful how long the power run is. You start getting over, anything past that main wire we ship with, you might run into issues. At my own home, I was like, I'd pre-wired keypads in my house, and I was like, I'm gonna put these remotes in. Well, next thing I realized is my wires were like 50 feet to 70 feet runs at a cup level, and I ran into major issues with the power on these. That's way too far. I was new to Qolsys at the time, and to these IT remotes, and I ended up having to run new power to get them to work properly. I had outlets very close to the IT remotes in my home, and I was able just to run it down and have a 6-foot run instead of a 50-foot run. So be careful on how long that power run is. You do want to keep that low on these panels. I would say I've seen even once you get past 15 feet on these, you can start to have issues depending on what kind of wire you're using. The next sensor I want to talk about is our most common sensor, is the IQ Mini. This has dual batteries in it, those CR2032s. Having 2 batteries is going to give you a longer battery life for this sensor. Has an off-the-board antenna to get good range, and this has about a 1-inch magnet gap on it, which is awesome. It's a strong magnet gap. We use 3M tape and screws that are included on these, and they come in white or brown. And just some best practices that we have for all of our sensors. The main one for this is make sure it's in range and use the sensor test. At the end, once I get through all these sensors, I'll show you that sensor test. But we have a sensor test on the panel that actually shows, shows the noise floor of a home, and on a graph it shows where these sensors are coming in each time they're tripped. It's a really amazing test. You guys might already be familiar with it, but we'll go through it. And the next sensor we have, and I did go over this briefly when we saw the full page of sensors, but this is our full-size sensor, our standard sensor. It's called the IQ Door Window S. This has superior range. Once again, I said it's about 30% more range than our standard sensor, but it does have only a 1/2-inch magnet gap. So as far as that gap, it's half as what our Mini is. But that magnet can be placed on either side of the sensor. That reed switch is located right in the middle of the guts inside that sensor, so you can put that magnet on either side. And once again, this uses 3M tape and screws that are included in the sensor. Some best practices for this: once again, make sure it is in range and always use that sensor test. And remember, it's a smaller magnet gap than the IQ Mini door window. First time I used one of these, same thing. I'm out in the field. I just brought some with me because we're going to be doing some guy's massive garage, detached garage, and we knew we were going to need a little bit more range than the Mini for how far this was from the house. At the time, we didn't have PowerG. Now we would have just used PowerG, but when I placed these in, I wasn't thinking about the magnet gap, and I ended up having to go out and adjust the magnets after I had installed them. So that's one thing that I've made a mistake on before, and just make sure, hey, it does have a smaller magnet gap than the Mini does. The next one we have is our IQ door window extended. This looks a lot like the Mini, but it's extended on one side to include terminal blocks. These terminal blocks allow you to add in a switch, or if you want to run a switch over to a door or to windows, or special window glass sliding doors, you can use that on this. Once again, it has the off-board antenna, and it also has, you can use this with the magnet, and it has that 1-inch magnet gap. Once again, it uses 3M tape. The screws are included. As always, make sure you use that sensor test and that it's in range. Know that there's no resistors needed on the terminal. And then this was a question probably people had, is how long can I throw that switch out there? And we say the max lead length is 20 feet. And also the main thing I see this used for, and what I think it's great for, is a garage door. People run into issues with the tilt sensors on garage doors, and it's nice to have one of those nice industrial switches that you can just hook up to the door and just tie it right into these terminals. So like I say, that's the best use case and what we see this used for the most out there in the field. But awesome sensor. The next one we have is the IQ recessed door window. And this sensor, like I said, this is normally the sensor that technicians put in their own homes. If you're doing someone else's home, people using those minis or whatever, and they look clean. But in your own homes, or like in a front door, a lot of people, they want the sensor to be hidden. So they'll use this recessed sensor. It's a 3/4 diameter hole size, and it is 2 1/4 inches long. And you can flush mount it with the rare earth magnet on the one side. So it does have a very strong magnet inside it, that rare earth magnet. And some best practices, as always, we say, make sure it's in range, use the sensor test, and then be careful when you're drilling these in. You don't want to over drill the hole where you make it too loose and it can just slip in and out. Or with recessed sensors, a lot of you probably know this, but I have seen a technician pop out the side of the door or pop out the side of the frame because they don't go straight in. So you never want to do that. But there is no tamper on these, and they just learn in by inserting the battery. So as you insert that battery, they're going to learn in. Great sensor. Next one is our IQ tilt. This has the built-in tilt mechanism, has the dual batteries again. So it does look a lot like our IQ Mini or like our other sensors, but that's where you look on the box, you see it's the IQ tilt. It has an off-board antenna. One thing with these is, you want to make sure you mount horizontal with the arrow facing up. And between trips is 30-second timeout. So people will run into that sometimes. You're like, dude, I open and close the garage, 3 times and it's not tripping. And it's like, well, you did that all within 30 seconds. You're made to only trip, once every 30 seconds, and they time out. And I'll admit, I am not the biggest fan of tilts that are out there. Even this tilt. Tilts have always had issues I've seen in the field. People are, put them on a garage in some way, and then next thing you know, it's shaking. The door shakes, it gets windy or something, and then you have false alarms. And that's why I'm a huge fan of the IQ Mini Extended that has the terminals that you can actually wire in a switch, one of those nice industrial switches that you can mount to the garage door, and those are much more reliable than I believe a tilt is. Next sensor we want to talk about, it's a unique sensor, is our IQ shock. Most dealers don't use the shock. They just never have, and it could be, hey, it's more expensive than a door window sensor. But shock sensors are pretty awesome, and there are some huge dealers out there that this is the main sensor, one of the main sensors they sell. To the point we've had times as a company where some of these large dealers have bought all of our such shocks and cleaned the shelves, where we've been on back order. So some companies, like I said, some dealers do love these. The specs on them, it's a door window and shock sensor in one. The jumpers allow for multiple configurations, and it has an adjustable potentiometer. And I have a couple slides on this that'll kind of get into some of the little in-depth on this one sensor, because it is a more complicated sensor than just our standard sensors. Some best practices: we say leave the jumpers to the default settings for most scenarios. Well, what are those most scenarios? Well, here you'll see there's 3 jumpers that allow you to customize the behavior of this device. We have GP number 1 to 3. So the rightmost jumper, when looking at this open device, when the battery's at the bottom, that's kind of how we've labeled it. And by moving those, turning them on and off, you're going to be disabling the read switch or enabling it, things like that. And this is all going to be in the instructions. So like I said, the majority of the time, you're going to leave those jumpers where they're at. As far as the default mode or this factory settings with all 3 jumpers on, you see this, it says the shock sensor and the read switch share DL number 1. So either the shock sensor or the read switch can generate a fault or prevent a restoral on DL1. So that's your DL code, that 6-digit code. So by having that on, it's going to be able to use either the read switch or the shock going on. Somebody breaking that window that you put it on, the frame. Also says, shock fault events are suppressed or do not report if the read switch is enabled and the read door is open. Magnet, is not present. It's not there. So just some specs on this. Once again, it's a door window on 1. Has dip switches that allow for multiple configurations, and it has that adjustable potentiometer. And there's a test mode and a pre-warn. Once again, those most common dip switch settings are off, off, on. And if you look inside here, you see down at the bottom, you see those dip switches. Right now, it shows all those as off. There's a LED indicator, a buzzer, the shock sensor, and then you have the potentiometer that allows you to adjust the sensitivity of the sensor. So I know a lot of techs, as they're testing that, they'll kind of bang on the window and turn it down so it's you're not gonna have false alarms. And this is a sensor that if you're not used to it, I would say, install one at your home or at your business and play with it and get used to it before you put it in someone's home. Just because they are a little different, On here it says, please note, when test mode is enabled or on, the IQ shock will not transmit signals to the IQ panel. This mode is only used for initial installation of the shock sensor. So that's the test mode. So really cool sensor though. Like I said, there are some companies, this is their number 1 sensor that they upgrade. So some techs love it. They make a lot of money off this. The next sensor we're going to talk about is our IQ motion. This motion sensor does have some things you need to know about it, or you can run into issues. First of all, the range. It's an 30 by 40 foot range, 80-degree field of view. It has dual batteries, the AAA batteries in it, and it has an LED walk test mode. That is very important to use. We always recommend with any motion, do a walk test as a technician to see where it's working, to see what areas it's hitting. This has a 40-pound pet immunity, and the screws are included. So best practices on the sensor, things that are very important. It says you must mount at 6.5 feet high, angled down. So this sensor, if you wanted to flush mount it against the wall, and it's 6.5 feet high, it's actually going to be too high up, and it's going to overlook everything. It might be catching just the top of people's heads until it gets way out to like 30 feet to like the edge of its range. So that's why we say 6.5 feet high, angled down, not flush mounted. Then it has, as far as modes, it has the normal mode, a sleep mode, meaning once it's been triggered, it goes to sleep for, I believe, 4 minutes. And then it has a walk test mode. And during that walk test mode, when it's in test mode, you're going to want to walk. You'll see it trip. You'll wait a second, allow it to reset, and then you'll walk again, allow it to trip. That's when you're doing the walk test. But very reliable motion sensor, but you do need to use it right. Once again, if you put it up 6.5 feet or higher and you just flush mount it, you will run into issues with it not working as you want it to. You got to make sure it's angled down. I do say if you do want to flush mount it, you need to mount it 5 feet high, and then you won't have issues. The Alarm.com image sensor, version 3. This works with our panel. Put in that daughter card. The daughter card must be installed with the power, with the panel powered down. This has a 35-foot range and 90-degree motion field of view, and the camera is a 63-degree camera field of view. There's 3 sensitivity settings that are remotely configurable that you can just, remotely, meaning you can do them from Alarm.com. 40-pound pet immunity. Somebody has a pet, you can make that immunity go up. If they don't, you can actually make it a little more sensitive. During the day, you're going to have color images, and then at night, you're going to have the infrared black and white images that come in. But this new image sensor that they came out with not too long ago, I swapped my old one out, put this in my basement, and it shoots very clean images. It does have a nice resolution that is a huge step up from the older Alarm.com sensor. So I do love this sensor. I'm a fan of it. It is a way for a family maybe to feel like, hey, I do have a little bit more home automation in my house, and it's cheaper, than maybe getting cameras. Definitely doesn't work as well as a camera would, because with this you're only getting peek-ins and snapshots. You're not getting a true camera, a live view camera. Some best practices. This sensor you can actually mount 6 feet to 8 feet high, depending on how high you mount it. The back piece flips around to change the angle. And this is one of those sensors that you use lithium AA batteries with. If you don't use the lithium batteries, you are not going to get the battery life that you want. So I've seen when batteries go dead on this, people put in like a cheaper battery, and within like a month or 2 months, the batteries go dead that quick. So, our glass break sensor. Awesome glass break sensor. This will cover most all glasses, plated, tempered glass. The range on it is 5 feet to 20 feet. Of course, some basics. You don't want to install glass breaks if somebody has plantation shutters and they keep them shut, or they have heavy drapes that cover the windows. Of course, that's going to damper that sound and make it much more difficult for these to be set off. This does have those dual batteries, the CR123s, strong battery, and they have the LED detection indicator, so when they go off or when they're in test mode. These things you're going to want to mount 6.5 to 8 feet high. They have a 20-foot line of sight to the protected glass, and do not transmit when in test mode. So once again, the line of sight means it's not going to go around walls. You can't install this in a hallway, and it's going to cover all the bedrooms. That's one of the biggest issues I think the industry has ever seen with some techs or sales reps saying, hey, these will just go in a hallway and you can protect your house. Not going to happen. It needs to be line of sight. And once again, it does not transmit a signal when it's in test mode. Well, that means when you first open it up and you tamper it, you put it in test mode, and that's so you can use your glass break simulator and trip it, and it's just going to, as you do that, it's going to light up that red light. But during that time in test mode, it's not going to send a signal. You want to wait for that test mode to expire and then be able to send the signals to the panel. And when you put it in test mode, it's a 5-minute test mode. Next thing we have is the IQ fob. A lot of people don't use the fobs anymore, especially since our panel has Bluetooth disarming, where you can program up to 5 smartphones to a panel. But it's still a device that is used. It does have a panic on it and whatnot. One quick thing with the Bluetooth phones, I did notice when Apple first did their iOS, I believe it's 12, their last update, the major update on their phone, they did have some Bluetooth issues where the Bluetooth was turning off or whatnot. Well, if Bluetooth is off on a phone, it's not going to work in someone's home. Luckily, they came out very quickly and they made a new update, a new software to fix that issue. But I did notice that I do have the iPhone, and I did notice that issue when I first upgraded my phone to, I believe it was iOS 12, and then now they put up the iOS 12.1 or whatever to fix the Bluetooth issue. But as far as the fob here, It has a 100-foot range. As you push down on the buttons and hold it, it does transmit an LED to let you know, hey, it's sending a signal out. And, you know, you can arm stay. First time you push it, the lock button does arm stay. You push it a second time, it's an arm away. And then this is also a 2-button panic. So if you hold the lock and unlock at the same time, you're going to send the panic. So once again, here's the best practices, as I said. You know, push down lock and unlock at the same time for the panic. As far as the star and the light, those are for future use. We currently don't have them working. You know, originally when these fobs were made, a lot of panels they would work with had a technology called X10, where it was just lights on, lights off. That's when you'd use that button. But currently, those are roadmap for us. We do not have them working on any of the features with our panel. And the next thing you have is our IQ pendant. This comes with a wrist strap. You know, some can wear it as a wrist, you know, little watch type thing, or as a lanyard around their neck. It has heartbeat LED blinks every 1 minute to let you know that it is working. It's water resistant up to 1 meter. So, you know, if somebody's wearing it, they can take a shower, they can take a bath and not have to worry about it. And it can be a supervised panic if desired, meaning if somebody has a storefront or they want to have a panic button in the closet, they can make this a supervised panic button. And if that button was able to ever to leave the area, the sense of supervisor would be noticed and it would go off. So it is a sealed 4 to 6 year battery that's not replaceable. So this is one of those things that once the battery goes out on it, you'd have to get a new device. But it is our IQ pendant, cool little device, and it does work great as a supervised panic. We're going to get into life safety real quick. Let's see, we're at 12:35. I'm going to go through this life safety a little quicker, but there are some good things you need to know. And then we'll jump into the PowerG sensors. And we have had some people asking, hey, what about PowerG? So we will get into that. So here we go. Life safety. The first one is the IQ smoke. It's a photoelectric smoke chamber. Fixed heat detector also. So 135 degrees, gets over that. Has the rate of rise with the fixed. It has the 3 batteries, AAA batteries that it uses, and it has a test button on it, just like most all smokes do. As far as the best practices for the smoke, and this sounds crazy, but you want to learn it in as a smoke M if you want both smoke and heat functionality. If you learn it in as just I think it's just a normal smoke and not the smoke M, then it will only do smoke. So if you want the heat also, with that fixed heat detector at 135, you need to make sure it's and I said rate of rise, I take that back. I'm not sure about the rate of rise, but it is a fixed heat. Gets over 135, it's going to go off, or it's going to go off from smoke. So dual function there. Make sure it's in range, as always, of the panel, and you know, use the sensor test. See where it's coming in on that sensor test to make sure it's in range. You know, we have seen, another thing we've seen with these is that the supervision window is only 4 hours. All the rest of the sensors have a 24-hour defaulted supervision, but life safety is 4 hours, so that's a sixth as much. And some sensors, I'm not sure on this, but some sensors, when they send a supervisory, they're only sending half the power or half the packets. So instead of sending 8 packets, they're sending 4 packets. It's just how a lot of sensors are made, help save battery life. And that's why I have seen some companies that say, hey, I want to avoid supervision issues, so they go up to 24 hours. That's fine, that's their decision. But as far as for the UL listing on this, it needs to, we defaulted a 4-hour supervision to stay with the UL listing. That you can change that in the panel. We have our IQ Carbon. You know, the status LED lights on it, has the CR123 battery, and has a test button. One thing I want some little info behind an IQ Carbon or any Carbon that's out there. As far as UL listing, for these to set off, I believe it's at 400 parts per million. Once the environment hits that, it's still considered, it's not going to kill you. It might start to give you a headache or something, but at 400 parts per million, it has 15 minutes before the device will go off to be under UL listing. So our device, I believe, right at about 9 minutes, between 9 and 10 minutes, is when it will go off. People ask, well, why wouldn't it just go off right away? Well, let's say you had this in an area with, a garage or something. Somebody starts with the car and CO goes up. If the CO is only going to last for a second, it's not going to just go off. It's not like a smoke detector. If you spray a smoke detector with a can of smoke, it'll go off, right away or just after a couple seconds. If you got a can of CO and you sprayed it at a carbon and it sprayed and it detected, our levels went, over 400 parts per million, but then a minute later it goes back to normal, it's not going to send a signal. The UL listing is 15 minutes. So ours, like I said, it's right at about 9 minutes that it goes off. I've tested these where I put two of them in a bag together, got a can of CO, put it in there, timed it, and it was right at about 9 minutes. They both went off simultaneously. So that's how all carbons work. I have had phone calls on this before. It is a 5-year CO2 lifespan. After 5 years, it just breaks down and you need to replace it. Ceiling mount at least 12 inches from the wall, or wall mount at least 6 inches from the ceiling. But do not put lower than a light switch on the wall. Everybody has their own way of doing these. I've seen COs out there that plug into an outlet, so people are putting them down low. But CO is slightly lighter than air, so it should slightly go up. And that's why we say light switch or higher in a home, but a lot of times it's going to be circulating or whatever. But that's what we recommend. Light switch or higher, at least 6 inches from the ceiling. Environmental devices that we have. First one, we have our IQ temp sensor. And this detects highs of 100 and lows of 40. There's 2 separate DL codes. It has those dual batteries, has an off-board antenna, and 3M tape, and screws are included. So some best practices here. You can learn in high, low, or both, depending on the need. If you're up in a cabin that's up in the mountains, you're worried more about freezing and, hey, the furnace kicked off, you'd want to use that low. So, that's what you'd set. But both high and low learning is group 52 freeze, and follow the quick guide auto learn process very closely on these to make sure you're doing the high or the low or both. The next one we have is the IQ flood. This flood comes with the wire, so you could put the actual sensor up higher, and then the switch that goes down below to where the water would be installed at the base of a wall or whatnot. I love these. I have 4 of them in my house because I'm just paranoid of floods. Actually, it's because I have had my washer overflow once, and I've had my dishwasher had an issue, and it ruined my wood in my kitchen. So I have a couple of these all over the place just because I don't want to have flood damage. They can save you a lot of money for a cheap sensor. So you have your dual mounting options, wall or floor. Some best practices here. You want to make sure you mount that transmitter up out of the water source and secure, flood probe the baseboard or the subfloor. You want to have it down there secured so it's not going to get kicked or get bent up where it's not on the floor. And you're going to program this as a flood, subtype 1 multifunction in the programming. And to test this, we recommend it. To test it, just put it in water. Put it in a glass of water for 15 seconds to trip it. That's going to show you that it is working by water. You can't just, I don't know if it'd work if you stuck it on your tongue for 15 seconds. I don't think it would. But stick it in water for 15 seconds, that's how you'll trip it. And then it'll just reset. Some other devices, just really quick, we have our IQ card image sensor. This is the daughter card that can be installed in the panel with the alarm.com image sensor. If you put this in, you can have up to 5 image sensors paired to that panel. And you want to make sure you install this with the panel powered down, and make sure you connect the antenna that's in that slot. If you don't connect the antenna, you're not going to have any range. And then use the locking screw that comes in the packaging to secure it down. We have our IQ Hardwire 8. These are rarely used anymore. It's kind of our older hardwire takeover module. This does have a 1 to 10K resistor learning, so it automatically learns in the resistance value of 1 to 10K. We always recommend you factory default these out of the box, pulling down a button as you power it up, and it's going to factory default it. And then make sure you follow the EOL learning instructions very carefully. Just go through the instructions on this. Then we have an IQ Hardwire 16. One thing that's awesome about these that we did recently add, a revision we made, was we added some resistance that let's say if the pre-wire is right next to some electrical lines, has some interference on the line, our older version had some issues bleeding that off. We've added in some resistors to our new IQ 16 that's in shelves now, distribution, where it will bleed that off. Because we used to see, 2% of the time, people would be installing these, 1% of the time they'd run into that issue where, hey, this one zone's not working, and that's why there was some resistance or some interference on the line. So, has a large external antenna. So it's just a great sensor. I do, once again, just recommend follow the instructions. We do have a video online installing this IQ 16. It's an Ask Jenny video. I believe it's actually to our old video, our old panel, or Gen 1. But we will have a new IQ 16 video out soon. It does have a siren relay. There's 500 milliamps of power on board. And once again, 1K to 10K resistor learning. We got to jump through these. We have our Z-Wave devices. I'm just going to show we have a dimmer. The dimmer does not have a ground. This training wasn't made more for Z-Wave, as more security sensors. That's why I'm just going to jump through these. We have our outlet. This does have a ground. This is just an on-off, unlike the dimmer that you can adjust. With Z-Wave, once again, always clear before adding. We do have an IQ light bulb. It's awesome. It acts as a repeater. And it includes that light lock switch, that little kickstand that holds the light on to keep the power on. Once again, always make sure you clear these before adding them. Our IQ siren is awesome. It's 105 decibels. It has a backup battery that if someone kicked out of the wall, it will still be going off. It would last. The backup battery is a 3-hour battery. It's 105 decibels, very loud. It is Z-Wave Plus. All these are Z-Wave Plus devices. But PowerG, let's get into that. So PowerG, first of all, I want to show you the different panels, the different SKUs. Up here, you see these different SKUs. QS 9201, 9202. Those are Verizon or AT&T. That's going to change the different SKUs. So first of all, you have, what type of, if you want Verizon, AT&T, or TELUS, and then you also have the Interlogics, the Honeywell, or DSC, 319, 345, or 433. So 3 different flavors, and then each flavor has Verizon, AT&T, or TELUS. But the main thing with these panels is PowerG. That's what people are getting these for. You have that superior range, 4 times the range. You have the crazy mega encryption that we'll go over. And then you have all these devices down below that it'll work with. We have our IQ remote, which works wirelessly, but then the rest of these are PowerG devices. This first little door window is what they call their vanishing. Then you have their main standard door window. Actually has the auxiliary input in it. And then you have an array of motion detectors that will work with the panel now. You have your standard motion. You have one with a camera. You have a curtain motion that senses motion, floor to ceiling. That's what that means by a curtain. You're going from the floor to the ceiling, and now if that gets crossed, it's going to trigger. You have the PIR and MW, the motion. You see all these different motions they have. A couple of outdoor motions, ones with the integrated camera, the pet immune. So lots of motions. And then you get into the glass break, the smoke and heat, a CO detector. They have a siren. And the siren, so it looks the same as their repeater. One cool thing about this repeater is the repeater radio is not behind, inside our panel. When you put that radio inside the panel, there is some interference from a panel. So you're getting 4 times the range of a normal sensor. But if you added a repeater onto it, now you're getting mega range, much more range than you would even get out of the panel. So the repeaters are awesome, especially if you're getting into like some commercial uses. But a lot of that is panel placement. If you put the panel in a central location, you should not need a repeater. And then they have their key fob panics and so on. And we included the Z-Wave devices at the end of these. So we're going to just jump into a couple devices here with the Z-Wave and some best practices. But first, we're going to watch a video on PowerG, and then we'll talk about some more of the encryption, how it's a two-way sensor, and how it frequency hops. But we're going to watch a video. This might be a little choppy, but it's more just kind of a slideshow video. So just watch along and you kind of understand what this sensor does, the PowerG. So really cool technology here. I'll explain some of this. First thing I want to show is frequency hopping. As you saw, you had that car driving down the street and it's avoiding cars in front of it. That's avoiding interference is what it's showing. It's just an example of how this works. As it's sending a signal, it's going to be hopping frequencies. So if there's a bad hop, then it's going to jump and just go to a good hop. And it's going to use all these frequencies to send a signal. So that's going to help avoid blocking or interferences. Amazing technology. The second is that 128-bit AES transformation rounds. So what this is doing is it's sending all the bits, and then it goes into this thing. This gets complicated, but it shifts all the rows up. And it mixes everything up for the encryption. It cleans it up, and it comes down, goes through all these keys and this output, and that's where you get this 128-bit, encryption process that it goes through. And it's complicated, and it just makes it so it's a super secure encryption that happens that no other sensor on the market has. Just like I said, it is a very incredible technology that no one has, and this just totally makes it so it's hacker proof, and it can't be attacked. So it's sending all these different signals through different channels and whatnot. To jump into it, I'm going to jump into their main sensor here, and then I'll explain some other stuff that the sensor does. So the first thing is some specs. You got a link quality indicator shown on the device. What does that mean? It means that when you trip this sensor, it's going to show you, first of all, it's going to blink and show you, hey, I received a signal from the panel. And then the LED is going to show how strong of a signal it has. So it's going to send a signal, and then when it receives a signal back, it'll show, hey, green means it has a great signal. If it's amber, that means it has a good signal quality. And then if it's red, it means it's getting into a poor signal quality. So you see that on the device as you're tripping it. These have a prolonged battery life. And I spelt that wrong on here on the slide, but it's a battery life. But prolonged battery life. And people might say, well, how is it prolonged? Well, what the sensor does is when it sends a signal out, it'll talk with the panel and see how strong of a signal it needs to send to connect. So it's not going to have to send a full strength signal unless it's way, way far away. So if it's closer, to the panel, and it only needs to send half power signals, that's what it will do. And then let's say over time, if the battery got lower, and when it checks in for a supervision, for some reason it didn't check in, it's going to up the battery power and send it again and see what it needs to send it out each time. And that's how you're going to get a prolonged battery life. With these, they say they'll get 4 to 8 years of battery life, depending on how far away from the panel they are. Pretty cool. And the case will tamper when you open it. And once again, as we say in our panel, it has 4 times the range of a standard RF sensor. So sweet technology. So there's a lot of dealers out there that have said, hey, we're going pure PowerG now. It's going to help us avoid, any supervision issues or having to do, silly returns for a sensor that was too far away or on the edge. Some best practices here. You want to add it in at the location it's going to be installed at, or at least if you add it in at the panel, you need to allow it to adjust its power to the location. Because if you learn these in at the panel, they are adaptive as far as the signal strength they're going to send out. So it realizes, hey, I'm right next to the panel. I don't need to send as strong of a signal. As you walk away from the panel, it takes a second for it to realize that it's sending a supervision. Hey, I'm getting farther away. I need to up my signal strength. So that's why you have two things. If you learn it in at the location, it's already going to know, hey, what power it needs to send. But if you do learn it in at the panel, you need to wait a little bit as you trip it, so it'll up the power each time it sends and be adaptive, on that signal it's sending. To enroll these, we've had people call in and say, yeah, these won't tamper in as like your normal sensor do when I just, put a magnet next to it and remove the magnet. They're not meant to. These have to enroll into the panel. And to enroll PowerG sensors, you normally need to open them up, get your little mini screwdriver out, pop it open, and there's an enroll button. And then with that enroll button, if you just tap on it, it's not going to do anything. You actually have to hold it down for about 3 seconds, and then it will enroll into the panel, beep in. So those are some good best practices to know, things that people run into. And then once again, it does have that adaptive power, so it's going to change, what kind of signal it needs to send, and you just need to be patient with it. And the next sensor I want to talk about is the PowerG Motion. This is the PG9904P. Some specs: the link quality indicator shown on the device. Once again, the little LED. These have a 90-degree coverage, and they have pet immunity up to 85 pounds. One thing that's really cool, once you get into some of these other powered, like the PowerG Motion or the PowerG Glass Break, is it's a two-way sensor. All these sensors are two-way. Well, this allows you to have remote adjustability on like the strength of the motion. Meaning, hey, if it's too sensitive, you could be at your office and somebody calls in and says, hey, I'm having an issue, my motion's going off, it's too sensitive. You can actually adjust the power of that, the sensitivity, remotely through alarm.com AirFX. And that's the same with the glass break sensors. So that's something that's really cool. It can save you on having to return for a silly service ticket. You can just fix that at the office without having to send the truck out there and pay a guy $100 or $150 or whatever to adjust sensitivity on a glass break. Some best practices, once again, is add in at the location or allow to adjust to the location. So once again, this means that, hey, if you learn it in by the panel and you move it, when it trips, you got to give it a second for it to adjust and learn how far away it is from the panel. And that only takes seconds. I'm not saying it's going to take a minute. No, it's going to take seconds to adjust. And then once again, you just need to open these up to access the enroll button. And it's not just a tamper switch. It's actually an enrollment button that you hold down for 3 seconds, and then they'll learn in. The next sensor I just want to talk about, we're getting to 257. I do want to go over some test stuff that people want to stick on, but PowerG repeater. This extends the overall wireless range. So if you're doing a very large house, something huge, maybe, who knows, maybe this is a commercial building and you need more range than what you already have, you can add in these repeaters. And this repeater is going to give you even more range than what the panel gives you, more than that 4 times the range. So you can get very far away. It does have an LED indication for power failures, for activity, and installation performance diagnostics. And also has a 48-hour backup battery in it. So if power goes out, you have 2 days worth of battery power. Some best practices we recommend is, hey, we've noticed that if you place your panel in a central location, a lot of times you're not going to need this. But if you do, let's say have the panel on one side of a building, and then now the panel is not going to get to the very far side, this is where you'd want to use a repeater. But this is now you're getting into much larger spaces, because you already have 4 times the range with just using PowerG. So this would be used for much larger spaces. And the last PowerG device I want to talk about is their outdoor siren. This is a 110 decibel output has strobe light functionality for visual indication. It is fully supervised and it has a prolonged battery life. Some best practices, I didn't have any on this, is just make sure, hey, it's in range, test it. But it is a great device. I have an outdoor siren outside my house, and luckily I've never had to use it, but they are great to have if you want, noise outside the home. We are at 12:58. We have a couple minutes left, and I do want to get into some testing and tools here. So if anybody gets to the point, hey, I need to jump off, feel free to jump off. But these testing and tools are awesome. The first test I'm going to go over is for our standard sensors and then PowerG. This will be very quick. So our standard sensor test, SRF test, you go into settings, system test, sensor test, and this test, some of you are familiar with it, some aren't, but it's going to show the actual dBm signal strength of each sensor and graph that sensor against the ambient noise floor. So you'll see this graph here, you see the back window, it shows the average dBm, the last event, the amount of packets that received. When a sensor is tripped, it sends 8 packets, and that one is tripped twice, that's why it sent 16. And then you can actually click on the graph. If you do click on the toggle up top, that little toggle switch, you can actually see the real-time noise floor. And the panel, as soon as you click on that, every half second, our panel's going out and it's measuring the real-time noise floor of the home. What is noise floor? What are we talking about here? We're talking about the unseen. If somebody has a baby monitor, they have their Wi-Fi, they have this or that, radios, all that's going to change the noise level of a home. So that's where this is super, super nice to be able to see the unseen and what kind of noise levels in a home. So what we do is we get the real-time noise floor, and then on an actual sensor, we have different lines and different colors that indicate different things. So first of all, you're going to have that green that we see there. And the green represents every time the sensor changes its state, open and closing a door. It's going to mark that on the graph. Then we have a yellow line, and this represents 12 dBm above the ambient noise floor. As soon as you start getting into the yellow, we consider that poor signal strength, where you might want, this is with the S-line sensors, not the PowerG. This is where you might want to consider, okay, do I need a PowerG sensor? Did I route the antenna properly behind the panel? The S-line RF antenna. And then we have a red line that's 6 dBm above the noise floor, and that red line represents critical. If you get below critical, you need to definitely add in either a repeater or change to PowerG. Make sure, but we always say make sure that pigtail antenna is routed properly also. So really cool test. The PowerG test is also awesome. It's very simple. You're going to ping the sensor out there, and this is going to be, you go into system test again, and you're going to see PowerG test. It's different than our normal sensor test because PowerG works with a different technology. It's not graphed out like our other one is. With this one, as you go in, you're going to see, hey, on this example, we have a basement flood and a PowerG motion. Both of them are just showing signal strength strong. On these, you can go into them to more menu, and you can do different things. You can test the LED to see how far it is, if it's going to show up green or amber or red, depending on the signal strength, strong, good, or poor. And then even with the PowerG motion, if it has the camera, you can do a test picture, and it'll send that picture to the panel. It'll be stored on the panel in the disarm photos. So kind of a cool technology, very easy to test. Okay, it's either going to be strong, good, or poor with these, but you're getting 4 times the range as a standard sensor. Another thing with this is the PowerG daughter cards must be installed in the panel to access this test. If you don't have a PowerG card, you don't have an IQ panel 2+, this test is not going to be available. It's only if you have the PowerG daughter card. Then we have a bunch of cool Z-Wave tests. If you guys ever do Z-Wave mapping, you can test neighbor info. You can get a counter test, how many signals or how many commands have passed compared to how many have failed. We always recommend to have a system that has at least a 98% acknowledgement versus failed rate. And then we have a Z-Wave diagnostic map that actually shows you how all the sensors are talking to one another. This is my friend Jeremy's home here. You can see the double nodes are repeating nodes that are repeating to like outside lights of his house. The red X's are the little inactive or unreachable devices. He has a front door lock. You let the batteries go dead on. And then he has a couple alarm.com temperature sensors that work with the alarm.com thermostat that go to sleep and are woken up by the thermostat. And those are actually an awesome device where you could say, hey, I want this on upstairs is where everybody sleeps, but my thermometer's on the main floor. So you put the temperature sensor up where everyone sleeps, and you say, hey, after 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock, go off the temperature sensor. And we want to make sure that stays at, let's say, 70 degrees all night, since that's where everybody's sleeping. So really cool device there. And these are some great tests. With Z-Wave, we always say, hey, it's a mesh network. If you just try to have a panel and a door lock, a lot of times that's not going to work. The more devices you add in, the better that mesh network's going to be. So we're just a little over time here, guys. I do appreciate everybody getting on this for this little deep dive into sensors. I'm going to leave this open, so if you guys do have any questions you want to ask, feel free to type them in, and we'll respond, Whitney and I. But great little deep dive into our security sensors and a little bit of Z-Wave here. So once again, thanks for getting on, everybody. Thanks for your attendance, and we'll leave this open just so people can type in their questions if you have any. But thank you, and have a great afternoon.